It was a quiet evening in a small restaurant at the edge of town. The warm yellow lights made the place feel calm and cozy, like a little world away from the rush outside. The sound of soft chatter mixed with the gentle clinking of glasses and plates. It was one of those evenings when nothing much seemed to happen, and yet something in the air felt different, like a story waiting to unfold. Behind the counter, a young woman moved with quiet grace. Her hair tied neatly back, her steps light and practiced. She wore the simple uniform of a waitress, white shirt, black apron, hair tucked away, and carried a calm smile that looked easy but had been practiced through many long nights. Her name was Lena, and she had worked here for almost 3 years. To most people, she was just another face in the restaurant, kind and polite, always remembering orders, always ready with a thank you. But beneath that steady smile was a heart that carried something the customers couldn't see, a quiet dream, tucked away, almost forgotten. The restaurant wasn't fancy. It was the kind of place people came to for comfort food, birthdays, or quiet dinners. There was an old piano standing in one corner near the window. The owner had bought it years ago, thinking maybe someone would play it for guests one day. But it had been silent for a long time. Dust had gathered on its black surface, and the keys had lost their shine. Lena passed by that piano every day. Sometimes, when no one was watching, she would run her fingers lightly over the keys, just brushing them, not pressing down. She did it like someone touching a memory, softly, afraid to wake it up. Before she worked here, before the late nights and the long hours on her feet, she had lived in a world full of music. Her hands used to move across piano keys with confidence and joy. Back then, she believed music would be her whole life. She played in small school concerts, helped teach children, and dreamed of one day writing her own pieces, songs that could touch people's hearts. But life has a way of turning dreams into quiet shadows when things change too quickly. Years ago, her father had fallen ill. The hospital bills were heavy and the family needed help. So she stopped her lessons, stopped playing at events, and took any job she could find. First a cafe, then a diner, and finally this restaurant. One shift turned into months, months into years. And somewhere in between the noise of plates and orders, the music inside her went quiet. Still, every night after closing time, when the chairs were stacked and the lights dimmed, Lena would look at the piano and feel something stir. She never touched it then. She told herself it didn't matter anymore, but it always called to her, a silent reminder of the person she used to be. That evening began like any other. The early crowd had already come and gone. The dinner rush was still an hour away. She moved between tables, wiping them down, refilling water glasses, making sure everything looked neat. The chef hummed from the kitchen, and the faint smell of garlic and butter drifted through the air. At table 6 sat an elderly man who came in almost every week. He always ordered the same thing, tomato soup and grilled cheese. He liked to sit near the window where he could watch people walk by. He nodded when Lena brought his order, the same polite nod as always. "Thank you, dear," he said, and she smiled back the way she always did. At another table sat a young couple holding hands, laughing softly. Lena couldn't help but smile watching them. There was something comforting about seeing people happy, even if her own life felt far from it. The evening light outside was fading, turning gold through the glass windows. The restaurant looked warmer, more peaceful, and for a moment everything felt ordinary. Then a small group entered through the door, 3 people well-dressed but friendly. One of them carried a small bouquet of flowers. It was clear they were celebrating something special. When they sat down, Lena greeted them with her usual calm warmth. They were celebrating an anniversary, 10 years of marriage. They asked for champagne, and she brought it with a smile, pouring carefully into their glasses. The group chatted happily, and after a while, one of them looked over toward the piano in the corner. "Hey," he said to the others, "I wonder if anyone ever plays that thing." Lena's hand paused mid-step. She didn't look up, pretending to focus on clearing a nearby table. The couple laughed. "Probably just for decoration," the woman said. "No one plays live music anymore." But then the man turned to Lena. "Do you know anyone who can play?" he asked kindly. "It's our anniversary, and a little music would make it even nicer." Lena froze for just a second. Her heart gave a small jolt. She didn't know what to say. "The piano?" she asked softly, almost hoping someone else would answer. "Yes," the man said with a smile. "Even something simple would be lovely." She smiled back politely and shook her head. I'm afraid no one really plays it, she said. The man nodded, not wanting to bother her. That's all right, he said cheerfully. It just looked lonely sitting there. But his words stayed with her. It just looked lonely. She went back to work, pretending to focus on her tasks. But her mind wasn't on the tables anymore. She kept thinking about the piano, about how lonely it did look sitting there in silence night after night. As she walked past it again, she caught a glimpse of her reflection in the shiny black surface. It startled her a little. She looked tired. Her eyes looked older than her age. She wondered, when did I become someone who stopped playing? The dinner crowd started to fill the place soon after. Orders came in, plates went out. The clatter of dishes and the low hum of conversation filled the air. But inside Lena's chest, something else was stirring. It wasn't loud, not yet, just a quiet restlessness, like a song trying to find its way out. When the crowd finally settled and the rhythm of the evening slowed, the anniversary couple waved her over again. Miss, the woman said kindly, you really don't play at all? Lena hesitated. I used to, she admitted, surprised by her own honesty. The man's eyes lit up. Then maybe just for us? Just a little something? She looked around. The manager was busy in the back counting receipts. Most of the guests were relaxed, sipping their drinks, talking softly. She thought about saying no, but instead, her voice came out quiet and unsure. Maybe just for a minute, she said, their faces brightened. Please take your time, the woman said. It would mean so much to us. And just like that, Lena found herself walking toward the piano. Her hands trembled a little as she pulled the stool out. She sat down, feeling the weight of 100 memories rush back all at once. The feel of the smooth keys under her fingers was almost too familiar. It hurt in a sweet, strange way. She pressed one key softly. The note rang out pure and clear, echoing across the restaurant. A few heads turned. Someone at a nearby table smiled. Lena took a slow breath. She didn't know what she was going to play. Her mind was blank, her hands uncertain. So she started with something small, something simple and safe. The same little tune she used to play as a warm-up years ago. It was gentle, like the sound of raindrops on a window. The melody drifted through the air, light and soothing. The conversations around her quieted a bit. A few people turned in their seats, curious. Lena's fingers moved slowly, carefully, as if remembering an old language. Each note made her feel a little more alive. The piano wasn't perfect. Some keys were slightly off tune, but she didn't mind. It felt good, like coming home to a place she thought she'd lost. For the first time in years, she wasn't just a waitress serving tables. She was a musician again, even if just for a moment. The sound filled the room, soft but full of emotion. And as she played, she didn't see the dishes or the receipts or the tables anymore. She saw colors, light, and memories. She remembered her small apartment where she practiced for hours. Her father listening proudly. Her dreams of stages and audiences. She remembered how music used to make her feel free, hopeful, alive. When the simple tune came to an end, the restaurant was silent for a heartbeat. Then someone clapped softly, then another, until the whole room joined in gentle applause. Lena smiled shyly, stood up, and nodded. Thank you, she said quietly. The couple smiled at her, touched. That was beautiful, the woman said softly. Thank you for sharing that with us. Lena returned to her work, her heart still racing, her hands still tingling from the keys. She didn't know it yet, but that small moment, the decision to play just one simple tune, was about to change everything. The sound of the last note still lingered in the air when Lena went back to her work. Her hands were shaking slightly and her heart beat faster than usual. She wasn't sure what had just happened, but something inside her felt different. For the first time in a long while, she felt alive in a way that had nothing to do with the job or the long hours. It came from a place deep inside her, a place she thought had gone quiet years ago. As she cleared the tables, she could feel eyes following her. People were smiling at her, not the polite smiles they gave a server, but real smiles, warm and curious. One man at the bar lifted his glass toward her as if to say, well done. The older gentleman by the window nodded with quiet approval. Even the chef peeked out from the kitchen door, grinning. Lena tried to brush it off. She told herself it was nothing. Just one song, just a moment. She didn't want to get caught up in it. But deep down, she knew something had shifted. The rest of the evening passed smoothly. When the anniversary couple paid their bill, the woman placed a small folded napkin beside the receipt. Inside there was a note written in neat handwriting. "Never stop playing. You have a gift." Lena held that napkin in her hand for a long time before tucking it into her apron pocket. She didn't know why, but she didn't want to throw it away. It felt like a little piece of something she'd lost, a reminder that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't gone forever. When the restaurant finally closed for the night, the manager walked out from the back, holding a stack of papers. He stopped near the piano, looking at it thoughtfully. "Did you play tonight?" he asked, his voice more curious than strict. Lena froze for a second, unsure how he'd react. "Just a little," she said softly. "The couple asked me to. I thought it might make their evening special." He stared at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I saw the video." She blinked. "Video?" He held up his phone, showing her a short clip. Someone from the dining area had filmed her while she was playing. The sound was clear, the little melody floating through the air, her hands moving gently over the keys. In the video, people were quiet, watching, smiling. "It's already on social media," he said. Someone tagged the restaurant. "People are commenting." Lena's heart skipped. "Oh no," she said quickly. "I didn't know they were recording." "It's fine," he interrupted, still watching the clip. "Actually, it's more than fine. It's good. Real good." He looked up at her and smiled. "You made this place come alive tonight." She didn't know what to say. It had been such a small thing, just a simple tune. She never thought anyone would care. That night, when she finally walked home, the city felt a little different. The streets were quiet, the lamps glowing against the cool air. She walked slowly, her thoughts drifting. The rhythm of her footsteps reminded her of the soft tempo of the song she played. At home, she changed out of her uniform, made herself a cup of tea, and sat by the small window. Her old keyboard stood in the corner of the room, covered with a thin layer of dust. It hadn't been touched in months, maybe longer. For a long while, she just stared at it. Then quietly, she got up and plugged it in. The small red light flickered to life. When her fingers touched the keys, a rush of emotion filled her chest. She began to play, slowly, uncertainly, the same tune she had played at the restaurant. But this time, something inside her pushed further. She started to add little changes, small flourishes. Deeper chords, the sound filled her tiny apartment, wrapping around her like a memory come back to life. She played until the tea went cold, until her eyes grew heavy, and for the first time in years, she went to sleep smiling. The next day at work, the atmosphere felt different. People were still talking about the performance. The restaurant's social media page had gained followers overnight. The video had been shared dozens of times. One comment read, "This is what real beauty sounds like. Simple, honest, and from the heart." Lena couldn't believe it. She tried to stay focused on her duties, but everywhere she turned, someone was bringing it up. "Didn't know we had a star among us?" one of the cooks joked as she passed by. She laughed nervously. "Hardly a star," she said, but a small spark of pride flickered inside her. It felt nice. Not the kind of attention that makes you nervous, but the kind that reminds you you're still capable of something meaningful. That evening, around the same time, a few regular customers began asking if she'd play again. She hesitated. "I don't know," she said. It was just a one-time thing, but the manager overheard. "Play if you want," he said. "Maybe make it a Friday thing. Live music could be good for business." He smiled, but his tone was gentle. "Only if you want to." Lena looked at the piano sitting there in the corner again. She could still feel the warmth of the keys from the night before. Something inside her whispered yes. So after the rush slowed, she sat down once more. This time she didn't start with the simple tune. She began with something she had written years ago, a song she had never finished. The melody started soft, uncertain, then grew into something rich and emotional. People stopped eating again. Conversations faded. Even the waitstaff paused to listen. The restaurant, for those few minutes, became something else entirely. When she finished, the applause came faster, louder. A few people even stood up to clap. She blushed, overwhelmed, and gave a small nod before slipping back into her routine. Later that night, the manager handed her an envelope with a small bonus. "For the music," he said simply. She tried to protest, but he waved her off. "You made people feel something tonight. That's worth more than tips." As she walked home under the streetlights again, Lena thought about his words. She didn't just serve food anymore. She had given people a moment to feel, to stop, listen, and breathe. And that meant something. Over the next few days, the video kept spreading. Someone from a local community page shared it with the caption, "Waitress brings restaurant to tears with her piano performance." Comments poured in, people asking her name, where she played, and when she'd perform again. At first, she didn't know how to feel. It was exciting, but also strange. She wasn't used to being seen like this. For years, she had blended into the background, part of the quiet rhythm of everyday life. But now, people were noticing. One evening, a woman came into the restaurant just to see her. "Are you the one who played the piano?" she asked, smiling. "I saw your video online. It was beautiful." Lena felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you," she said softly. The woman nodded. "Don't stop," she said. "You have something special." Those words echoed in Lena's mind all night. At home, she began writing again. Small pieces, bits of melodies that came to her while washing dishes or walking to work. She started keeping a small notebook in her apron pocket, scribbling down notes during breaks. The music came slowly at first, but then faster, like a river that had been blocked for too long. Still, a part of her was afraid. Afraid that this was just a fleeting moment, that people would forget, that the real world would pull her back down. But every time she sat at the piano and her fingers touched the keys, that fear melted away. One night near closing, the restaurant was quiet again. Only a few guests left. The lights dimmed, the piano waiting. The manager walked up to her and said, "You know, a local reporter called. They want to do a short piece about you in the restaurant." Lena's eyes widened. "About me?" He nodded. "They liked your story. Said it's inspiring and how you brought music back into an ordinary night." She didn't know what to say. The idea of being on camera made her nervous, but deep inside she also felt something else. Hope. That night, she played again, but not for anyone in particular. She played for herself. The song she chose was soft, full of heart, like a whisper between her and the piano. And when she finished, she looked around at the smiling faces, strangers, friends, co-workers, and realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. As she wiped down the piano before leaving, she smiled to herself. The dust was gone now. The keys shone faintly in the low light. It no longer looked lonely, and neither did she. Days passed, and the little restaurant that had once been just another quiet spot in town started to feel different. More people came in every evening now, and many of them asked the same question before they even ordered food. "Will the waitress play tonight?" At first, Lena found it funny. She still didn't see herself as anything special. She was just doing her job, taking orders, clearing plates, smiling at customers. But every time she passed the piano, her heart would tug a little, like it was calling her. Sometimes during the slower hours, she would sit down and play softly. It wasn't a planned performance, just small moments when she felt the right kind of calm inside. People listened quietly, sometimes even stopping mid-conversation. The music filled the air with something warm and peaceful, something that made strangers feel like friends for a few minutes. Her manager noticed the change too. The restaurant had more visitors than ever before. Families, couples, even tourists came by just to see the girl who played the piano, but he never pressured her to perform. He always said, "Play when it feels right." That made her respect him even more. Still, the sudden attention made her nervous. Some nights she worried that people would expect too much, that one wrong note would make them think she wasn't good enough. But then she would sit at the piano, close her eyes, and remember what really mattered. That music was never about being perfect. It was about feeling something. One Friday evening, a man walked into the restaurant with a camera bag slung over his shoulder. He introduced himself politely and said he was from a local news station. "We've been hearing about the piano performances here," he said. "Would you be open to a short interview?" Lena froze for a moment. She wasn't used to that kind of attention. She wanted to say no, but her manager encouraged her gently. "Just tell them the truth," he said. "Tell them why you play." So she did. They filmed a small segment, just a few minutes long. She spoke softly about how she had once dreamed of being a musician, how life had taken her in a different direction, and how one small moment, a request from a kind couple, had brought her back to the piano. She played a short piece for them, nothing fancy, just honest and heartfelt. A few days later, the video aired on local TV and was shared online. The response was overwhelming. People began leaving messages on the restaurant's page, saying how her story had touched them. Some said they cried while listening to her play. Others said she reminded them of their own forgotten dreams. Lena read some of those messages late at night after work, her eyes wet with tears. She never thought something so small, one simple tune, could reach people she'd never met. One afternoon, while setting up tables before opening, the restaurant phone rang. The manager answered, then waved her over. "It's for you," he said, smiling. She took the phone, confused. A gentle voice on the other end introduced himself as the organizer of a local music event, a charity concert that featured small-town talents and independent musicians. He said they had seen her video and wanted to invite her to perform. Lena was speechless. "Me?" she asked. "I'm not a professional anymore." He chuckled softly. "You don't have to be. You just have to play like you do at the restaurant. That's what people love." She didn't give an answer right away. After the call ended, she sat by the piano, her hands resting quietly on her lap. She hadn't played in front of a real audience in years. The thought of it scared her. But deep down, she also felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Excitement. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about it. The stage, the lights, the sound of applause. It all seemed like another lifetime. Finally, she decided she would do it. Not for fame, not for money, but to honor the part of herself she had hidden away for too long. The next few weeks were busy. After her shifts, she stayed late in the restaurant, practicing when the place was empty. The manager didn't mind. He often stayed too, cleaning up quietly while she played. Sometimes he'd just listen in silence. At first, her fingers were stiff. She made mistakes, missed notes, lost rhythm, but she didn't stop. Little by little, the music began to flow again. She played the same pieces she used to love. Soft classical songs, emotional ballads, and her own unfinished compositions. One night, as she was playing, the elderly man who always sat by the window came in late. He listened quietly for a while, then said, "You found your voice again." His words hit her harder than he probably realized. That night, she went home and stayed up writing. The melody she came up with felt new yet familiar, like it had been waiting for her all along. The day of the charity concert arrived. The event was held in a small community hall downtown. The stage wasn't grand, but it was beautifully decorated with soft lights and flowers. Local singers, small bands, and young artists were performing. The atmosphere was warm, welcoming, full of energy. When Lena arrived, she almost turned back. She felt out of place among all the confident performers tuning their instruments and chatting with one another. She kept her head low and waited quietly near the side of the stage. But when her name was announced, the audience clapped kindly, and she took a deep breath. She walked to the piano under the lights, sat down, and let her hands find the keys. For a moment, everything went still. The hall was quiet. She could hear her own heartbeat. Then she began to play. It started soft, like a whisper, a melody built from her memories. She poured every feeling she had into those notes. The exhaustion from long nights, the loneliness, the hope she once lost, the quiet joy she'd found again. Her hands moved as if they knew the way without her thinking. People leaned forward in their seats. Some closed their eyes. Others held hands. The sound filled the room, warm, honest, and full of emotion. When the final note faded, there was silence for just a second. Then the applause came, strong, heartfelt, rising like a wave. She stood and bowed, her heart racing, her eyes wet with tears. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. After the concert, people came up to her thanking her for the music. A young girl shyly asked for a photo. An older woman told her she reminded her of her own daughter who used to play. Each word touched her deeply. As she walked home that night, she looked up at the stars and smiled. She realized something important. The world hadn't changed. She had. By saying yes to that small moment weeks ago, she had opened a door she thought was closed forever. The next day, she was back at the restaurant, tying her apron and getting ready for another shift. Everything looked the same, and the same tables, the same lights, the same smells. But inside, she felt different. Customers greeted her with warmth. Some mentioned they had seen her at the concert. "You were amazing," one woman said. "You played from the heart." Lena thanked her with a quiet smile. It still felt strange, all the attention, but she was grateful. Later that evening, when the crowd settled and the sun dipped below the windows, she sat at the piano once more. She played the same song from the concert, but softer this time, more intimate. The notes floated through the air, wrapping around the room like a gentle embrace. Her co-workers stopped for a moment to listen. The chef leaned against the doorway, nodding his head to the rhythm. Even people passing by outside paused by the window to watch. When she finished, there was a quiet peace in the room, not loud applause this time, just the kind of silence that means something real. She looked around at the smiling faces, at the piano shining softly under the lights, and felt a calm sense of joy. Music, she realized, wasn't just something she did. It was who she was. And somehow that simple tune she played weeks ago had not only transformed one evening, it had changed her entire life. The days that followed the concert felt like a dream. The restaurant was busier than ever. People came not just for the food, but for the atmosphere, for the chance to hear the music that had touched so many hearts. Some guests brought flowers. Others left little handwritten notes by the piano, saying things like, "Thank you for reminding me that dreams don't die," or, "Your music made my evening special." Lena read each note carefully before placing them in a small box she kept under the counter. It wasn't about fame or attention. It was the way people connected through her music that moved her most. For years, she had believed her playing didn't matter. Now she saw that even a simple tune could make someone's day a little brighter. The restaurant's owner started keeping the piano polished and tuned. Sometimes he would come in early just to listen while she practiced before opening. "You've changed this place," he told her one morning. "It used to be just a restaurant. Now it feels alive." Lena smiled but didn't say much. Deep inside, she was still trying to understand how all of this had happened. Just a few weeks ago, she was a quiet waitress with a forgotten dream. Now people were reaching out to her from different places, asking her to play at events, to share her story. At first, she hesitated to accept any offers. The restaurant had become her comfort zone. The piano in the corner felt like home. But one evening, an older woman approached her after a performance. She introduced herself as a music teacher from a local school. "I've seen your video," she said warmly. "Would you consider visiting our students? Some of them have lost confidence. I think hearing you talk about your journey might inspire them." The request caught Lena by surprise. She wasn't used to speaking in front of people, especially not about herself. But there was something sincere in the woman's eyes. So she agreed. The following week, she visited the small school. The music room was bright and filled with instruments, guitars hanging on the wall, a few violins resting in their cases, and an old upright piano that reminded her of her first one. The students sat in a circle, curious and shy. She began by telling them a little about her life, how she once studied piano, how life got hard, and how she stopped playing for years. "I thought my dream was gone," she said honestly. "But sometimes the world gives you another chance if you're willing to take it." The children listened quietly, eyes wide. One of them asked, "Were you scared to play again?" She smiled. "Terrified," she admitted. "But I did it anyway. And that's what matters. Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do it even when you are." Then she sat at the piano and began to play. It wasn't a grand performancing, just a soft, heartfelt piece that filled the room with warmth. The students watched in silence, their faces glowing with wonder. When she finished, they clapped so hard that she couldn't stop smiling. Afterward, several children came up to her, telling her about their own dreams. One said he wanted to learn the guitar but was afraid of failing. Another said she wanted to sing but thought she wasn't good enough. Lena told them the same thing she had told herself many times lately. If it makes your heart feel alive, then it's worth doing, no matter what anyone else says. When she left the school that day, she felt lighter. It wasn't just about music anymore. It was about helping others find their spark again, just like she had found hers. As the weeks went by, more opportunities appeared. A small cafe invited her to perform on weekends. A local radio host asked her to share her story on air. Everywhere she went, people connected with her, not just because of her talent, but because of her honesty. She didn't pretend to be someone else. She didn't try to sound perfect. She simply spoke and played from the heart. One night, after finishing her shift at the restaurant, she sat outside with a cup of tea, watching the streetlights flicker. The city was quiet and a cool breeze brushed her face. She thought about the years she had spent running from her dreams. Believing it was too late to start again, she realized now that it was never too late. Not for her, not for anyone. Still, there were moments of doubt. Sometimes she wondered if all this attention would fade, if people would eventually move on. But then she would remind herself why she started again. It wasn't for fame or recognition. It was because music made her feel whole, and as long as she had that, she would be fine. One Friday evening, the restaurant was completely full. Every table was taken. The lights glowed warmly and the air was filled with laughter and the smell of fresh food. The piano sat ready in the corner, polished and gleaming. As she played that night, a young man came in holding a small camera. He filmed quietly, capturing her performance. Later, he approached her with a kind smile. "I'm making a short documentary about local artists," he said. "Your story is something special. Would you let me include you?" Lena hesitated, unsure, but he seemed sincere, so she agreed. Over the next few days, he interviewed her at the restaurant, filmed her playing, and even visited her small apartment to capture her writing music late at night. He asked her questions about life, about dreams, about what music meant to her. She spoke simply, honestly, just like always. When the documentary came out, it spread quickly online. It wasn't dramatic or flashy. It was calm, heartfelt, real. People connected with it deeply. The comment section was filled with messages like, "I needed to hear this today," and "Her story reminds me that it's okay to start over." The restaurant received more visitors than ever before. But more importantly, people came with gratitude, not just as customers, but as listeners who felt part of something meaningful. One evening after closing, she stayed behind alone. The restaurant was quiet, the lights dim. She sat at the piano, running her fingers gently over the keys. It had become her closest friend, her quiet companion through everything. She thought about how far she'd come, from a tired waitress who avoided her dreams, to someone who could move a room to silence with a few notes. And it all started because one couple had asked her to play. She smiled softly at the memory. Then, without thinking too much, she began to play a new song, one she had been working on for weeks. It was gentle but full of emotion, a story told without words. Every note carried a piece of her journey, the sadness, the struggle, the hope, and the light she'd finally found. When she finished, she sat still for a while, listening to the echo fade. For a moment, she felt tears fill her eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude. The sound of a slow clap broke the silence. She looked up to see her manager standing by the door. "That one," he said softly. "That's your best yet." She laughed quietly. "Maybe because it's mine," she said. He nodded. "It's more than a song. It's your story." A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. The organizer from the charity concert called again. This time, he wanted her to play at a much larger event, one that would feature artists from all over the region. The thought made her nervous, but she accepted. The performance took place in a beautiful open-air venue under the stars. The crowd was bigger than anything she had ever seen. But when she sat at the piano and began to play, the world seemed to disappear again. It was just her, the keys, and the night sky above. As she finished, the audience stood and applauded. For a moment, she closed her eyes, letting the sound wash over her. She realized that the applause wasn't just for the music. It was for her courage, for the journey, for all the nights she thought she wasn't good enough but kept going anyway. When she walked off the stage, she felt light as air. The same woman who once feared the piano had now shared her heart with hundreds of people. That night back home, she sat by her window and looked out at the quiet city lights. The world outside was calm, but inside her, everything felt alive. She took out her old music notebook, the one she used to carry years ago, and opened it to a blank page. At the top, she wrote 4 simple words. "The song goes on." Because now she knew, no matter what came next, she would keep playing. Not for fame, not for attention, but for the simple, beautiful truth that music had given her life again. And deep down, she understood something else too. That sometimes, All it takes to change everything is one small moment of courage, one quiet note, and one open heart. The weeks after the open-air concert passed quietly. Life at the restaurant slowly returned to normal, but something inside Lena had changed forever. She still worked her shifts, greeted customers with her gentle smile, and played the piano every evening. But now, when her fingers touched the keys, there was something deeper behind every note, a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. People still came to hear her play. Some were regulars who had been there since the beginning. Others were new faces who had seen her story online, or heard about her performances through friends. But what touched her most were the small moments, when someone paused in the doorway just to listen, or when an older couple held hands while she played a slow tune. Music had become a bridge again, connecting her to strangers, turning quiet nights into shared memories. One afternoon, as she was cleaning tables before the evening rush, her manager came over holding an envelope. "This came for you," he said with a small smile. Inside was a letter written on simple cream paper. The handwriting was elegant and careful. It read, "Dear Lena, I was in the audience the night you played at the open-air concert. Your music moved me deeply. I could feel every emotion in your notes, the sadness, the courage, the hope. I'm the director of a small community center for children. We run art and music programs for kids who can't afford lessons. I'd love for you to visit, maybe even teach them once a week. I think they could learn something far beyond music from you. With respect, Samuel." She read the letter twice, her heart beating faster each time. The idea of teaching scared her a little. She'd never seen herself as a teacher. But she also remembered how lost she once felt, how one kind word or song could have changed everything. Maybe now it was her turn to do that for someone else. She took a deep breath and decided to go. The community center was in a quiet part of town, a small brick building surrounded by trees. Inside, it was full of color, drawings on the walls, laughter in the halls, and the soft sound of instruments being tuned in one of the rooms. The children greeted her with excitement. Some of them had never touched a piano before. Others were shy, afraid to make mistakes. She understood that feeling all too well. On her first day, she didn't start with notes or scales. Instead, she told them a story. "I once thought I'd never play again," she said. "I thought my chance was gone. But then, one night, I sat down at a piano and played a simple tune. And that little tune changed everything. So remember this. Even small things can grow into something beautiful if you give them time." The children listened, wide-eyed, then crowded around the piano, eager to learn. Every week she visited the center. Slowly she began to see the magic unfold. The shy girl who wouldn't look anyone in the eye started playing short melodies. The boy who said he had no rhythm began tapping perfect beats. Their laughter filled the room like music itself. And for Lena, those afternoons became her favorite part of the week. Months passed, and her world grew brighter. Her confidence deepened, but so did her gratitude. Sometimes, after teaching, she'd walk through the park near the center, watching the trees sway and the light fade over the rooftops. It amazed her how life had found a way to give her back everything she'd once lost. Not in the same form, but in a better, gentler one. One day, as she was preparing for class, one of her students, a small boy with curious eyes, tugged at her sleeve. "Miss, when I play, I feel something in my chest," he said. "It's like my heart gets warm. Is that normal?" Lena smiled softly. "Yes," she said. "That's how you know you're doing it right." Around that time, the man who made the documentary about her stopped by the restaurant again. He told her the film had reached hundreds of thousands of views online. "People still talk about your story," he said. "They say it gives them hope." She was quiet for a moment, surprised. She didn't think her story was special. She had simply followed what her heart told her to do. But maybe that was why people connected with it. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was real. He asked if he could do a follow-up film to show what had happened since. She agreed, but only on one condition. "You have to film the kids too," she said. "They're part of the story now," he smiled. "Deal." So they filmed again, her playing at the restaurant, laughing with her students, walking through the city she once felt invisible in. The new film was even more heartfelt than the first. It wasn't just about music anymore. It was about second chances, kindness, and the quiet power of believing again. When it was released, messages flooded in from around the world. People wrote about finding courage to restart their own dreams. Painters who had put away their brushes, singers who had stopped performing, parents who encouraged their kids to try again. Lena read every message carefully, her heart full. She realized that her story had grown far beyond her. It had become something that lived in others, too. One evening, after finishing her shift, she sat at the piano long after closing time. The lights were dim and the city outside was peaceful.